About 500,000 moms a year epidemiologically experience postpartum depression. Less than half of those are diagnosed, less than half of those are treated.
Today we are joined by Barry Greene, who is the CEO of Sage Therapeutics. This is an incredibly exciting company. It's a company that's making just massive waves in the mental health space.
What's exciting about this time in the history of postpartum depression, an approach like Zurzuvae, we have a new tool in the toolkit of healthcare professionals, particularly OBGYNs, that just never existed before.
Postpartum depression did not become a formally defined medical concept in the United States until 1994.
If a mom experiences depression in her third trimester or shortly after giving birth, it is the OBGYN in their office that is the front line for seeing that. And there's really an incentive now to focus on screening, diagnosing, and treating.
Hi, everybody. Dr. Chase Feiger here. Today, we are joined by Barry Greene, who is the CEO of Sage Therapeutics. This is an incredibly exciting company. It's a company that's making just massive waves in the mental health space. Under Barry's leadership, Sage is focused on bringing innovative solutions to some of the most challenging areas in healthcare, including postpartum depression. We're going to dive into their breakthrough treatment, Zurzuvae, and we're going to discuss how it's reshaping how providers, especially OBGYNs, are trained to address psychiatric illness. So first and foremost, welcome, Barry. It's great to have you.
Chase, thanks. I'm excited to talk about maternal mental health and brain health in general. It's great to be here.
Now, Barry has a very interesting background because before becoming CEO and a member of the board of directors at Sage, which he joined again in 2020, he brings more than 30 years of experience from the biopharmaceutical industry to this role as CEO. Prior to Sage, Barry served as president of Alnylam Pharmaceuticals since 2007. And before that, he held the position of chief operating officer at Alnylam when he first joined the company in 2003 as one of the founding officers of the company. Prior to his 17-year tenure at Alnylam, he was the general manager of oncology at Millennium Pharmaceuticals. So again, Barry has just absolutely incredible experience that he brings to the table as the CEO of Sage. Now, Barry, I have to say, it's incredible to think that although the disease has existed for centuries when you study medical history, postpartum depression did not become a formally defined medical concept in the United States until 1994 with the publication of the DSM-4. So again, I just want to repeat that for the people that didn't listen, Barry. Before this, PPD was considered part of a spectrum of illness related to pregnancy and childbearing, but it did not become a formally medically defined concept until 1994. Now, it's really exciting when I dug deep into the medical history here on Penn Medicine, for example. I was reading before this interview that it was recognized that some women experienced mental illness after giving birth since 460 BC. Again, when Hippocrates was writing about puerperal fever, which produced agitation, delirium, and attacks of mania. It's just incredible to think that even though we have seen aspects of this condition exist since 460 BC, that it did not become a formally medically defined concept until 1994. That's just crazy to me. But Barry, I really want to start there. Like, what do you think about that? I mean, it's just to me, it's just shocking.
Well, look, I think as you're well aware and you've studied, it's the practice of medicine. We're learning every day and changing norms based upon what we learn. What's exciting about this time in the history of postpartum depression, and you mentioned this already, I think with an approach like Zurzuvae and a new tool in the toolkit of healthcare professionals, particularly OBGYNs, it just never existed before. So you mentioned this, that paradigm shift is accelerating today.
It is. I mean, postpartum depression did not become a formally defined medical concept in the US until 1994. I just want to repeat that one more time to the listeners. Postpartum depression did not become a formally defined medical concept in the United States until 1994. Again, that's just unbelievable to me. And of course, with you all getting the first oral medication indicated to treat postpartum depression in 2023, I mean that's even more incredible. Uh, Barry, before we get into the depths of that conversation, I really want to start off by learning more about your background. I know I gave a high level, but I'd love to get deeper into your story and the path that you've taken. Can you share more about your background and really what drew you to Sage Therapeutics?
Yeah, Chase, I'd be happy to. And it certainly wasn't a planned path forward. So I'm an engineer by background. I was always interested in going into medicine and healthcare. At one point, I thought about going the MD PhD track for hospital administration. Met my wife. She was in law school. We decided I should go work for a couple of years before going to graduate school so she could graduate first. Great path change my life. We're still married. We've got two phenomenal kids. My son's actually getting married next year, so that's exciting time in my life. And my family makes me better every single day. So happy that we chose that path. But went to work after graduating from the University of Pittsburgh with Arthur Andersen Consulting, later Andersen Consulting. Prior, I was never there with Accenture. And the practice group, because of my engineering background, I fell in with, it was the group that was studying agricultural chemicals, food, and drugs. And back then it was big pharma, not biotech. Biotech was sort of nascent back then. I'm talking about the mid 80s. And as the practice grew, I wanted more and more to work on the pharma side of the world. And very fortunately, in the early 90s, had a chance to work on a spin out of Merck called AstraMerck, where I was a consultant, a handful of consultants, a handful of what would be former Merck employees built AstraMerck really from scratch. We had a chance to relaunch Losec, Prilosec, the purple pill, and really build a company from scratch, which is an exciting way to learn about pharmas, to build everything from scratch. The launch of Prilosec went well. AstraMerck was spun out as a joint venture. There was a CEO changeover. The new CEO, Matt Emmons, asked me to come on and lead commercial. So at a pretty young age, I was leading a fairly significant commercial opportunity. We grew Prilosec to over 4 billion, helping many patients in the United States, and really transformed gastroesophageal reflux disease as a known disease. To your point, it really wasn't very well known, and everyone said, stop drinking alcohol or spicy foods. In fact, it was a disease with pathophysiology that could be improved with a drug. So a really great learning for me to really listen to patients and patient stories, because as we were launching, the healthcare professionals said, there's really not an unmet need here. We can control acid reflux with H2s and other things. In fact, that's not what their patients were telling them. So a really good lesson early-ish in my career to learn, you need to talk to the healthcare professionals, but of course you need to listen to patients. So AstraMerck was fun, but fairly short-lived. We morphed into Astra Pharmaceuticals, a merger I led. And then when we finished the Astra Pharmaceutical merger, I was asked to be in London. Showed up, I was congratulated. I was actually employee number 9 in the world of AstraZeneca and led that post-merger integration. So after a significant amount of time at AstraZeneca, and just to be clear, I'm not mature enough for big pharma, or at least wasn't back then. So I left. And one of the interesting things that was going on at the time is biotech was starting to make a move. This is now 1998, 1999. And there was actually a white paper by a well-esteemed consulting group that said Cambridge, Massachusetts was going to be the biotech hub of the world. So we had a significant conversation with my wife about kind of what was next. And she was a general counsel of a firm, so it wasn't easy for us to move. But we kind of hitched up the wagons, moved up to the Boston area, and been up there ever since. And it really was an exciting time because I had an opportunity to join Millennium. This is prior to the acquisition. And really build an oncology group from scratch. That's where Velcade came from, and frankly, a lot of the Takeda pipeline came from the work that the Millennium team did 2000 to 2003. After launching Velcade, the first drug ever approved for myeloma, Alnylam was being formed. I got a call to come and talk to the folks at Alnylam, and was one of the kind of founding executives there. Joined Alnylam, we were a handful of people in rental facilities. We didn't even have a chemistry hood. And left, as you said, in 2000 after 17, 18 years, hired a couple thousand people in 20 countries, 3 drug launches, about 14 programs in the pipeline. All the data are coming true today. So that was exciting. But when I was at Alnylam, we had a collaboration with Regeneron, and it was interesting to me how much about the brain that we as an industry had learned. It felt like oncology did kind of in the 99, 2000. There were drugs, decent drugs, but we could get a lot more precise based upon what we were learning about oncology. The brain felt the same way. So as I was thinking about that, fortuitously, as my Alnylam announcement went out, I got a call from the chair of the board at the time, Kevin Starr, saying, let's talk about Sage. Got an email from Jeff Jonas, the current CEO, said, let's talk about Sage, and ended up joining the board a few months later, and then picking up CEO about 4 years ago. And it's been a very interesting ride. We've had some great successes with Zurzuvae. We've had some disappointments along the way. But what we're doing right now is we're taking all the learnings, the pharmacological learnings, the study trial learnings, and applying that to an early stage pipeline while still trying to grow Zurzuvae.
Barry, most of the conversation today is going to focus on Sage, but I have to ask because, again, your journey has been incredibly exciting. You've seen the ups and you've seen the downs.
Oh, yeah.
Of your time working in life sciences. I always like to say the downs make the ups feel that much better.
Absolutely.
How have all of those downs been? How have you kept that sense of resilience, and really just not only kept that sense of resilience as an individual, but how are you able to continue to motivate the team that you've had working with you in those down periods during your history as a leader in this industry?
Yeah, in the biopharmaceutical world, there's no straight line to success, and I think the great companies are ones that not only take advantage of their successes but manage well through those down cycles. We certainly had ups and downs at Millennium. We had ups and downs at Alnylam for sure, and the first decade at Alnylam was pretty rough because we were trying to crack the issue of delivery, getting the siRNA into the cytoplasm where the drug worked. I always point to really a couple things. One is let's focus on where's the science? Is the science sound? Is the science good? And then secondly, patient impact. And what keeps it going every day, particularly at Sage, we hear these stories from these moms almost every day. And you can imagine, Chase, there are stories that bring tears to eyes every time they're told because of just how gratifying they are. And so let's focus on the science, focus on patient impact. And I always think it's really important as a leader to do what's right for patients and make sure you're also doing what's right for your team. When our teams are at our best, we can do our best for our stakeholders, for our patients, for our docs. And when teams get disgruntled or worn down, they're not going to show up the right way. And all of us have had those experiences in the service industry or others where people just, something's going on. So we've got to make sure that teams continue to be motivated to do their very best every day.
That's really couldn't have been said better. I now want to shift the conversation into the impact of Zurzuvae. So let's talk a bit about that. What makes it unique, and how do you see it fitting into the current landscape of mental health treatment?
Yeah, Chase, maybe since you went there, kind of the historical view is going to be important because, as you said, before 1994, there wasn't a coding for postpartum depression, and even after 1994. Postpartum depression wasn't well recognized. Even 2 years ago, it wasn't well recognized. So what about that journey? Well, we all know that when a mom has a baby, she often experiences a baby blues period, a period where she's down, exhausted. Delivery is tough. And for the longest time, others would say, look, you just get over it, toughen up. This is the greatest experience of your life. You'll get through this downtime and everything will be fine. And what happened in the 90s is people started to recognize that during childbirth, there's major hormonal shifts, third trimester, even along the way, that dysregulates certain brain pathways, and that dysregulation of brain pathways causes a postpartum depression. This is not something you just get over. And when you and other journalists tell the world that postpartum depression is a serious medical condition and not a moral failing, you can't imagine how much that helps because of the stigma associated with, what do you mean you're not super mom? What do you mean you don't want to connect with your babies? And if we go back even a couple years ago, and you talk to an OBGYN community, caring, absolutely profoundly caring docs that care about the moms, that care about the babies, but depression wasn't something they could really do. What we're seeing with Zurzuvae is actually a profound shift, sometimes in practice patterns, where we're seeing OBGYNs, instead of suspecting depression or referring, they're screening, diagnosing, and treating. They're bringing moms back often to talk to PAs or NPs with screeners about their mental health.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because many patients with, as you mentioned, many patients with postpartum depression, the first individuals they turn to are OBGYNs, right? So how important is it for these providers to be equipped to handle psychiatric conditions, especially I'd say as frontline caregivers?
Yeah, it's something that I can tell you that the psychiatrists are very excited that postpartum depression is handled by OB-GYNs. And why is it? Postpartum depression, just like any disease, you want to attack a disease pharmacologically as early as in the disease pathophysiology you can. When the disease starts, if you can catch any disease early, that's better than waiting, and that's true for most diseases. So let's think about the patient journey. A woman's consulting with her OB/GYN pre-pregnancy, all throughout pregnancy, and obviously they're there at delivery and after pregnancy. So if a mom experiences depression in her third trimester or shortly after giving birth, it is the OB/GYN in their office that is the front line for seeing that. And even ACOG, the association, has recognized as Zurzuvae was approved, the importance of the OB/GYN community to own the disease, to screen, diagnose, and treat. Now, what's really been exciting, Chase, is you and others, have really captured this change in maternal mental health. The amount of media that we've gotten has been tremendous, and it's really helped the community understand that, again, this is a serious medical condition that needs treatment, not a moral failing. So that kind of sea change, which we're in the midst of, has been profoundly exciting and very helpful for those women out there that experience postpartum depression.
Absolutely. Do you think there's a gap in the medical training when it comes to OBGYNs identifying and treating mental health issues? And out of curiosity, I know that's part one of my question. Part two is really how can Sage and the broader healthcare industry help close the gap if you see them?
There's as you know, being a trained physician, there's always gaps in medical training. What you learn when you graduate in the 80s is very different than you're learning now. And science and medicine is moving at such a profound rate that it's actually the people that aren't seeing patients every day that are more up to speed than those that are 12 hours a day with patients and then at night can kind of read and catch up. So there's always a gap. And that's why it's so important for Sage and others in industry to be major educators in the healthcare professionals. It helps to educate practices out there and get practice to share best practice. So for example, very early on in the launch, one of the larger OB/GYN practices in LA was very public that because of Zurzuvae, they're literally asking moms to come back at 2 weeks. They're screening them with a PA. And if that mom is diagnosed with postpartum depression, they prescribe Zurzuvae. And if more practices hear that best practice, it's good for the practice and it's better patient care. That's really when better medicine comes together. So we've got a lot to do. We've got people deployed to the field on the medical science liaison side that talk about postpartum depression. And what's really important there is that even though we're out there and OB/GYNs are looking, it's really how they look. There's still a lot of work to do from, all right, I'm now looking for postpartum depression to understanding all the signs and symptoms so we capture every one. And epidemiologically, Chase, 1 in 8 live births is a postpartum depression event. So if we have a practice group that delivered 800 babies last quarter and found 30 PPD moms, in theory, epidemiologically, they may be missing 70 moms. And they can use that data to get better at examining their practice and understanding, are we missing moms with postpartum depression?
Absolutely. No, collaboration is definitely key to the successful rollout of really any product. Out of curiosity, I want to go deeper on it though. How does Sage partner with HCPs to ensure that treatments like Zurzuvae are understood and utilized effectively in real world settings?
It's publication, congresses, and continued education face to face. Meetings. We kind of use everything in our armamentarium, including social media. It's interesting. About 20% of moms tell us that they get a lot of their education off of TikTok. Others get it off of X. So we've got to be on those platforms as well with true information. And importantly, Chase, what we're seeing is OBGYNs beginning to integrate maternal mental health with obstetric care and initiating treatment for PPD. So it's really a great example of innovation bringing a positive change. And all of it matters. The live interactions matter, the non-personal promotion matters, the congresses matter. And we're at the very, very beginning of this educational process. A close friend of mine visited her OBGYN up in the Massachusetts area and just subtly asked about Zurzuvae. And she's not a baby's age, so the person she was seeing isn't delivering babies. And that guy said, well, oh yeah, I know about this brand medication, but it's expensive and insurance won't pay for it. And it's interesting because that's 100% wrong in Massachusetts, both at a state level and a commercial level. So we got work to do. We've got work to make sure that this preconceived notion that anytime a company launches a new drug, it's expensive, it can't be written, it's high out of pocket. We've got to overcome even things like there aren't big insurance barriers. We've got phenomenal coverage. We need to get all the word out there across both the medical condition, the use of Zurzuvae, and the fact that you can write and get Zurzuvae covered. And again, we're at the very beginning of that educational process.
How have you thought about leveraging technologies like artificial intelligence to help support in some of these efforts? Again, I love how you were talking earlier about how you've embraced, social platforms like TikTok and others to really meet patients where they are. That's absolutely critical. But how are you thinking about other, as I kind of shift, my mind goes into commercial innovation. How are you thinking about things like AI, leveraging AI to address like maybe not only commercialization efforts, but maybe even addressing some of the medical education gaps that might exist?
Yeah, it's interesting, Chase. I think that sort of AI slash machine learning type algorithms and approaches are probably overappreciated today, but far underappreciated in the long term, kind of like the internet was way back. So we've got to be on top of AI. We've got to learn it. So when these big shifts come, we're not behind the curve. We're in the curve, and we're using AI across R&D and commercialization. Obviously, when you're a small molecule company, even though we're a little bit more defined in neuroactive steroids and oxysterol chemistries, there's still a 10 to the 60th number of molecules that can be made. So that's almost infinite. We can add all those zeros together, but it's almost infinite. So AI, machine learning are really important to narrow down the binding sites and exactly how you make your chemistries. AI is important to understanding patient patterns, patient journeys. AI has also been important in the field in terms of helping our medical professionals or our sales force understand what's the next best move, what's the next best place to go. Because if you are delivering a message, but there's no receptors there, that message can't be absorbed. So you want to go where the receptors are, to use that metaphor. So it helps across aspects of the commercial area as well. I'd say it's still 99% knowledge and human intervention, but by being in AI along the way, as these big turns come, as technologies get better and we really figure out how to use them, we're in the forefront of it, so we can capture those big turns.
Barry, this has been a really exciting and insightful discussion. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your perspective on really what's next for Sage and how you see the company continuing to lead in transforming mental health care.
Yeah, look, it's important. We at Sage want to continue to be leaders in the brain health. The unmet need is profound. These are hard challenges, and we need real breakthroughs that don't just slow disease progression, but really help patients where they are, as you've already said. So first and foremost, it comes the continued success of Zurzuvae. We've got to continue to reach as many moms as we can, and the numbers are staggering. About 500,000 moms a year epidemiologic experience postpartum depression. Less than half of those are diagnosed, and less than half of those are treated. So if Zurzuvae can be that paradigm shift that gets to more and more of those moms, then we got to continue to do that. The other really interesting thing to watch out for, and this is not helpful from a mental health perspective, but we know that if a woman's experienced depression or a mental health crisis, they're more likely to develop something like postpartum depression. So absolutely focused on PPD and continue to help that transformation. As I mentioned earlier, we are taking everything we've learned, both pharmacologically, things we put in the clinic, the data we're seeing, as well as clinical study conduct, and applying that to our early pipeline. So for example, we have a molecule in phase 1 right now called Sage 319. Sage 319 is a GABA PAM, but it's an extrasynaptic preferring GABA PAM. Behind that, we have the different area of the brain, the excitatory part of the brain, NMDA, and what we've called negative allosteric modulators. And we're going to bring those to development candidates into the clinic. And then some interesting science leveraging our neuroactive steroids and oxysterol chemistries that might go after other pathways. Chase, one of the things that we all know is that if you're trying to get drugs into the brain, or if you're trying to target a brain target, the drug needs to get into the brain. And we've seen unfortunate failures because of the challenge of getting through the blood-brain barrier or actually getting drug into the brain. One of the things we know very well is when our molecules get into the brain. So we can leverage those brain penetrant opportunities and go after targets that may not be the NMDA and GABA circuitry. So way more on that to come, but I think we're kind of learning from the science and regrowing that science from here.
Barry, this is great. Can't thank you enough for joining us. As a side note, before we go, are there any other topics that we didn't have a chance to hit on that you think our listeners really need to hear more about yourself and the incredible work that Sage is doing?
What I can say is that we as biopharmaceuticals have a obligation to global health to keep going and going and going. We can't let the downs get in the way. And I encourage all of my peers to do what George Merck told us to do a long time ago, which is focus on doing what's right for patients, and the profits will follow. And I try to run Sage that way. We certainly ran Alnylam that way. Did that when we launched Velcade at Millennium, go back to Prilosec. So let's keep patients at the center of everything we do.
Barry, this is great. I really enjoyed this conversation. I know everyone is going to enjoy listening to this conversation. Really great piece of advice for really not just individuals who are looking to learn more about Zurzuvae, but up and coming biotech CEOs, existing big pharma CEOs. Really can't thank you enough for taking the time, and thanks for joining us.
So Chase, it was a lot of fun. Appreciate it. Thanks for the great questions.